Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Scott Kane. I am the E-rate coordinator for the state of Kentucky. I'm joined today by my partner in hijinks, Caprice Robinson. We are the team that primarily works on the state application, and then we also serve as one of the lines of defense for helping you all as you navigate the wild and wacky world of E-rate. Today, we are going to be going through the Form 471. We'll take a look at a couple of examples of, I guess, what you'd call the sort of standard, the most common types of applications. We'll look at one that's for Category 1, and we'll look at one for Category 2 that uses the example of a CATS contract. And then we'll also, at the end, have a conversation regarding things like mini bids. We'll talk about some document retention, some important things that you'll need to be keeping track of, and bid evaluations as well. So we'll get into a little bit of that at the end. We do want to make this as interactive as possible. So please feel free, not only those in the room, but also online, please feel free to raise your hand online here, just jump in and say, hey, Scott, I got a question. I'm more than happy to be flexible as possible. I do want this to be as useful as possible for you. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to stop me in the midst, and we'll address your question. I will say that sometimes addressing the question will be something I might defer to later on in the conversation. I also might have to defer to a later date. I might need to go back. Sometimes the questions I get involve a little bit of research just to make sure that I am comfortable with the answer that I'm going to provide to you. So obviously, rather than provide you with misinformation in the first try, I'd rather make sure that I get you the right information, even if that takes a little bit of extra time to get that to you. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. I do need to share my screen online so that you all can see what we are doing, and so that you don't have to look at my lovely face, which I'm sure you'll be much rather looking at a practice site. So that's what we're in right now. We're looking at the Epic practice site. I would encourage you, if you have the information that you need, you can actually start your Forms 471 right now if you want. The portal is now open for filing Forms 471. It opened yesterday at noon. So you have that option, that ability if you want to. There are a couple of things that we probably won't be able to show in the practice site, because the practice site does not have full capability. It's pretty close, but there are a couple of things that might prevent us from taking a look, taking a deeper dive than what we might want to. But nonetheless, let's get on with it. To begin your Form 471, in the upper right-hand section of the landing page, the page that opens when you first log in, click on that link that says FCC Form 471. That will take us into the module that allows us to start filing our Forms 471. The very first item here, obviously, is a nickname. This is going to be whatever you want to call this application. For your sake, I recommend something that will help you easily identify what it is that you're applying for on this particular nickname. So you might do 2024 WAN application. And we are going to start with the example of a WAN application where you're filing for connectivity between your buildings at your district. Save and continue. You will hear those words ad nauseum today, so just be aware. Are you the main contact person? If you are, click yes. If you are not, you can click no and then enter somebody else's name. The main contact person does need to be a user of Epic. So if they have not been added as a user of Epic and you want them to be the main contact person, if you are not the administrator for your Epic portal, you will need to get in touch with that person so that you can add someone to the users list. I think in most cases, you're all going to be clicking yes there. You are the people who will be applying or filling out this application. And so you will be the main contact person. When it comes to the holiday and summer contact information, while this doesn't necessarily get looked at right away, this could be useful for you in the future. So I do recommend that if you know, for example, that come this summer, oh, come on, Charlotte, you know it. Let's see, I was at holidays. Yeah, if you know that you're going to be out, let's say, for example, the month of July, you know that you're going to be out the month of July, go ahead and put it in here. And the reason I suggest that is because there's a possibility that PIA might try to get in touch with you in the middle of July, and they would be asking for something to be delivered to them within 2 weeks. And if you don't respond within that 2 weeks, they will then deny your application because you were non-responsive. If they do that, and you have said in this part of the tool that you're not going to be around in July, you have grounds for appeal that will be automatically granted. They will reset the process and start it all over again. So it's really an important kind of, as they like to say, CYA kind of thing. So be sure to enter any of that you may be aware of as you go. You can request summer deferrals so that when the time comes, if you are in the middle of PIA and you're getting ready to go on vacation, get in touch with your PIA reviewer and ask for a summer deferral. That will basically stop the clock and stop the progress on your application until the end of the summer period, which I think ends up being right around Labor Day. So just be aware that that's there. Just something like out in July, please don't contact me then. Something along those lines. Simple, easy, straightforward. Save and continue. Now, we are going to select the category of service. Obviously, our example here is going to be a Category 1 example. Be aware that you cannot ask for both Category 1 and Category 2 on the same Form 471. So if you are planning to apply for Category 2 funding for anything in addition to any Category 1, you will have to do 2 Forms 471. They will need to be separate. So you can only do with one at a time on a Form 471, unlike the 470 where you can ask for both. All right, so our example to start with is Category 1. Save and continue. The next 3 pages are all basically review pages. They're going to be providing you with information that you have already entered, presumably, you have already entered into Epic. We start with your total number of students. This is going to be just the totals that are added up from your building profiles. Next is another review page where it's going to give you more details of each of your buildings and the breakdowns of numbers of students. Excuse me. And you want to be sure that you double check this, make sure that it matches what's on the discount data sheet that you just recently submitted back to us. We want to make sure that that matches for a number of reasons. There are 2 major reasons. First and foremost is because if we don't have the same data, we at state level won't be able to help you get through PIA when they ask for us to provide third-party verification for your discount data. Very, very commonly, they will come back to us and ask for a letter from the state on state letterhead that shows your discount data. If we have something different than what you've entered on your discount data form and in your Epic portal, we're going to run into some serious problems that we're not going to be able to provide you with that supporting information. The other thing that is also critical about this is that your entries in Epic roll into the state's application for the state network, and that funding, as probably most of you already know, comes back to you guys in the form of offers of assistance. So, that application and the funding that's associated with that is just as important as any of the funding that you might be getting directly as well as a part of your applications. So please do take the time to double check all of your information and make sure that it matches what you have submitted to us on your discount data sheets. If it doesn't, we'll address that shortly here in terms of where you can make the requests to have that information updated, just in case you might have not been able to get to that because those building profiles are now locked and you can't change that information on your own. Save and continue. There's one more page and it just shows you the calculations. You can show the entities here so that you can see how all the numbers roll up into the overall calculation. That again is going to be something that should match the information on your discount data. Save and continue. And we're now going to get into the meat of the forms for the Form 471. We're going to start by creating what I like to refer to as the shell. It's sort of the container of a funding request. And we're going to add an FRN. So we're going to add a funding request. FRN, funding request number. They refer to them as FRNs, but it's a funding request. So we're going to add a funding request, and it starts with a nickname here. We might do something like, let's do when activity charges. My spelling. Not going to worry about that. Is this funding request a continuation of an FRN from a previous funding year? Unless you're doing something that has funds that were originally initially set in a prior year where you might be doing installment payments, which quite honestly, I don't know of anybody in the state of Kentucky that's doing that right now. Anything other than that kind of situation, you will say no here. So the very most common response there is it's not going to be a continuation from a previous year. You do have the ability to copy an FRN. The FRN, for example, that you filled out last year, you might have exactly the same funding request this year as you had last year. That makes sense because you might be under, for example, a 5-year contract and you're in year 3 of the 5-year contract. You can use this copy FRN. You can then tell it, when you click that button, you can tell it to search by an FRN number or by the by the Form 471 number from the previous year. When you do that, it will bring up a list of the funding requests, all the FRNs that match your search. So if you had multiple FRNs on a Form 471 and you search on the Form 471, it will show you all the FRNs on that 471. If you search directly by the FRN number, it will show you the match for that FRN number from a previous application. You'll click on that, check it off. It's going to say, are you sure you want to copy this? You say yes, and it will take all that data. Presumably, it copies it right into this application. We have used this extensively when we develop the state application, and it works. The one thing I will advise is that once you do the copy function, that you make sure that you go into that FRN and look at the details. Review them carefully to make sure that what copied over is in fact correct, okay? It's going to copy over the cost. It's going to copy over the line speeds. It's going to copy over the FRN line item details, as well as the information that you would normally enter about the funding request itself. Back here. All right, so we've got our WAN connectivity charges. We're going to do an example that starts from the beginning rather than doing the copy. So we will continue. Our service type, we only have one option right now because we're in category 1 and there is only one type of service under category 1, and that is your data transmission and or internet access. We'll continue. Oh, I did. I entered a nickname. Oh, it took that out again. No, not a continuation. Continue. And you can see that just by that example, if you make a mistake or you fail to fill something out, it will prevent you from moving on to the next page until you correct the issue. All right, so how are the services for this FRN being purchased? If they are being purchased through a contract, you will click on contract, and it will then let you continue. You click contract, and it's going to take you to a page where you can search for the contracts that are associated with your building, or excuse me, your district profile. So it automatically enters your district number in the search by organization bin, and if you click search, it will bring up a list of all the contracts that you have. Now, notice that this only shows you 1 through 5, so you may need to do a little sorting. You've got more than 5 entries in the contracts module. I will say that if you have not, if you're brand new to this and you've never entered a copy of the contract in question, there is a way to do that. I will show you that now. I'm going to duplicate this tab to move back out of this here. All right, so if you need to enter information about a contract, let's say it's brand new this year, you've gone through the Form 470 process, you've now established the contract, you've got everything's in full working order, everybody's signed off on it. If it's a lease for more than $100,000, you've gotten the blessing that KDE's lawyers have to give it. All of that's done and you're ready to enter it. The way that you do that is from your landing page, click on the welcome text where it has your school district's name. From the resulting page, you'll notice that you have a lot of tabs across the top. You want to find the one that says contracts. Click on that. And now it takes you to the list of the contracts that you have already entered. And you can see that this shows now 20 of your listings. If you've got more than 20, then again, you'll have to toggle for some arrows to view all of them. Right now, you can just view them. But if you need to add a contract, you'll need to come up here to the right-hand corner and click on Manage Contracts. And that will now give you some new options. One is to look at your contract drafts. If you want to look at the draft contracts that you had, you stay where it is. If you want to see the contracts that you have submitted, you can select Submitted, and then at the bottom should have Add a New Contract as an option. So we will click on Add a New Contract. All right, so you're going to give that contract a nickname. Again, I highly recommend something that's going to help you remember what contract this is referring to. Pretty simple. If there is a contract number that was established either by you or by the service provider, enter that contract number here. If there is not a contract number, you can use a telephone number for the district, or you can use telephone number for the service provider. Sometimes, actually, it's fairly common that you'll have some sort of contract identification number that's been assigned to it by the service provider. So if you've got that, that's the one you want to use here. And then save and continue. Ready? Would you like to upload a copy of your contract? I'm not going to do that now. It's a simple process. If you say yes, it's drag and drop. You just drop the file here, give it a quick description. You're good to go. I'm going to say no here. I do recommend that you go ahead and upload a copy of the contract, because if this is the first year of the contract, somebody's going to look at it and they're going to be checking dates and so on and so forth, service type, make sure that that matches with your funding request. They're going to ask for it anyway. So if your local rules allow you to upload that contract, highly recommend it to just save a step in the process. And that way, when the PIA reviewer that just came from their their position at managing a Subway sandwich shop, that they can, you can just point them to, oh, that's already been uploaded. That's not, I wish that were more unusual than it is. All right, so we're going to say no here for now, just to expedite the process here. And then we have contract information. Is this contract based on a state master contract? The answer here is probably going to be no. You are establishing a brand new contract with a new provider, or perhaps it's your ongoing provider, but you've got a new contract, so you're gonna say no here. There are some instances where you might say yes, but probably not on your WAN contracts. It would probably be something that would be associated with Category 2 rather than Category 1. Is this contract based on a multiple award schedule? That means, did you have multiple people that actually got awarded the contract? For example, when we went out and established, KDE went out and established the KETS contracts, there are multiple providers on that contract. That would be a multiple award schedule. Obviously, your WAN providers are not that. So the example that we're using, again, we're going to say no here. It's not a multiple award schedule. If you are, if, by the way, and I think I've mentioned this already, but it's worthy of saying once again, if you have questions as you are going through these things, do not hesitate to give us a call. You can call me, you can call Caprice, you can call Matt. We're all more than happy to help you through the process and make sure that you've got the questions that you need answered so that you can be successful. Save and continue. And it's going to ask some additional information about this one being, can others piggyback off this contract? Have you established this contract so that other entities can use the contract too? All likelihood, no, you've just set up a contract between yourself and your service provider. Was this contract originally created by another applicant and you are joining it? Again, probably not the case. So you're going to say no here. Save and continue. Was a Form 470 posted for the product or services you are requesting? If you say no, you got problems. You got bigger problems than not being able to finish your Form 471. You got to go back and go through the process from the beginning. So you should be saying yes here. It's going to ask you how many bids were received. You will just provide them with the factual information of how many you received. Might be 3, for example. Might just be 1. Nevertheless, if you received any bids at all, obviously a number of some sort is going to have to go in there. If you didn't receive any, let's have a conversation. Give me a call. Let's talk about that, because there are some things that can be done in those situations, but it comes with a different kind of, well, for lack of a better word, minefield. There are different hoops through which you would need to jump to deal with a situation where you've got no responses from your Form 470. All right, so it's going to ask for you to search for a Form 470 so that you can match up the Form 470 that was used to establish your new contract. It automatically enters your build entity number, your district's BEN. You just click search. Now it's going to bring up a list of all your Forms 470. And in this case, we're going to select one of them that we created during the Forms 470 training. And we select the one that we want that's associated with the contract in question, and we're going to save and continue. Now it's going to ask for an account number. If you have an account number with your service provider, this is where you would enter that. If you don't have an account number, use your district's main telephone number as the billed telephone number. That's since the district is going to be receiving the bills, that is the telephone number that will serve as the account number in this instance. I can remember. Oh, I forgot to look up this number. Oh, goodness. There we go. There we go. All right. So your service provider should be able to provide you with a spin. If they can't, you've got also bigger problems, because if they don't have a service provider identification number, they're not eligible under E-rate under the E-rate program to deliver services and for you to receive funds for that. So definitely, if that's the case, we need to talk. But you can enter the spin, and up will come a list of the organizations that match that spin. Should just be one. You can also do it by name or a partial part of the name. You can see I searched by service, and it brought up a number of different options. You'd select the one that matches. Just going to select the first one just because, and then save and continue. Is this a multi-year contract? Probably, yeah. And I think most of you go through the process of establishing a new WAN contract every 3 to 5 years. Most, some are even a little bit longer, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it being longer. There's no limit specifically to the number of years you can have on a contract, except for the fact that your contract does have to have a drop dead. This is the end date for the contract. So it can't be an evergreen contract. What is the date you awarded the contract? This is going to have to be a date that's after the allowable contract date that was just shown, actually, as we were looking at the contracts. And you'll see the allowable contract date, I think, on this was the 12th of December. So anytime after that date would be fine. As long as we've awarded the contract. If you haven't awarded the contract yet, you need to make sure that it's awarded and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before you enter this information. So we're just going to say that it happened a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to save and continue. About the contract. Does this contract include voluntary extensions? So, for example, you might have established a 3-year contract with 2 annual extensions as options. So, in that case, that example, you'd use yes. And that's going to ask you, what is the contract expiration date if all extensions are exercised? So, if we were doing a 5-year contract that starts July 1 of 2024, that would take us through 24, 25, 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28, 29. So that would take us through June 30th of 2029. 30th. And by the way, having been through a handful of contracts at the state level that don't match up in terms of the E-rate year, when they start and when they end, I cannot more highly recommend to you all to avoid that situation if at all possible, and make sure that your contracts align with the E-rate year, at least in terms of the contract expiration date. Make sure that those match up, so that you don't have portions of a year that are left without service, where you'd have to go through the process of a filing way ahead of time. It can be a little bit of a nightmare if your dates don't match up. So make sure that those dates match up if at all possible. There are two contract extensions in the example I gave, so we'll say 2 there, and then it's the total remaining length of the contract if you exercised all the extensions in months. We said it was a total of 3 years plus 2, which would be 5. 5 times 12, if I'm not mistaken, is 60. So we'd say 60 months because it's a brand new contract. We'll save and continue once again. All right. So now we get to questions about pricing confidentiality. Is there a statute, rule, or other restriction that prohibits your publication of this of the pricing? I think in most cases, you're probably going to be saying no here. There's nothing at the state level that I'm aware of. And, again, I've been doing this for a little while, so I would think I would have heard something about that by now. But you are, unless you've got some sort of restriction at the local level, I think you're probably going to be saying no here. Save and continue. So now it's going to give you a chance to review all of your responses. Do take the time to make sure that this does match up with the information regarding your contract. And then you are ready to hit complete. Be aware that once you hit complete, it's done, it's locked, and you will not be able to edit it. If you make a mistake on this contract, you will need to actually enter a whole new one and make sure that you've got the correct, the correct information in that version. So again, does kind of reiterates the importance of double checking this information and making sure that it matches the information about your contract. So we'll say complete, action completed, and boom, there we go. Just added today. Let's see, contract. Oh, we awarded that. That is the most recent contract. All right, so there's the contract that's been entered. Now you can go back to your contract page in the Form 471. And I think if we just refresh this page. Oh, really? You're going to do me like that? Don't make that mistake. See what happened? Should have just hit search again. We started all over again. Boy, I love the way this thing works. Awesome. All right, so what did we say? WAN 24. I'll do this as quickly as possible. Activity charges. No, it's not a continuation. It's data transmission. It is a contract. And we should be back now. There we go. All right. So now we're getting ready to associate the contract to this funding request. Click search. And what do you know? There's the very first one. The one that we just entered is now there and visible and available to us. I think if I had just clicked search, it would have refreshed the search and that would have showed up. So don't make the mistake that I made and click the back button, because that took us all the way back to the beginning of the application. There are pitfalls, so just be aware. Let's see. We said it's a 3-year contract with 2 years extension, so 3 years, 2024, 5, 6, 7. So we'll say June 30th of 27. Notice that it does ask for the current term of the contract. So if you're in the first 3 years of a 5-year contract, it's whatever the end of that first 3 years is. If you are in an extension year or you're going into an extension year, make sure that you indicate the end of that extension as being the end of the current term of the contract. One other thing very much worth noting, if you are getting ready to go into an extension, make sure that you have something written. And it could be just as simple as an email, but something written that shows both parties agreeing to the extended year. Do that before you file your Form 471. Okay? Continue. Fiber request key information. All right. I'm not going to dive too heavily into this, but I do want to take just a few minutes to talk about some of these other things besides just the WAN connectivity that are eligible under Category 1. You can have things like special construction where you might have to have a little bit of a build out to, let's say, connect to a new building. If there is a build out that is necessary, that's referred to in this parlance as special construction. You might have special construction necessary for lit fiber, dark fiber, or fiber that the district owns, which, by the way, when I use the term self-provisioned, that's what I'm going to be talking about. That's the term that USAC uses to talk about district-owned infrastructure, self-provisioned. You may have, for example, a dark fiber lease where you need to upgrade or update, replace GBICs, for example. And if you don't have those GBICs, you don't light your fiber, do you? Without lit fiber, you don't have data transmission. So obviously, those GBICs are incredibly important. And as a result, because your connectivity doesn't work without them, those are eligible on a Category 1 connection. If they are on a Category 1 connection, they are eligible for Category 1 support. So you don't take away from your budget that deals with building level type things. And then there's maintenance and operations for things like self-provisioned fiber or dark fiber, where you have a contract with someone, with a company that provides the service of maintaining, watching over, monitoring, making sure that everything's that's operational, that you have a contract with them for those kinds of services. That can also be eligible under Category 1. If you say, if what you are applying for is any of those things, you will say yes here. And then it's going to ask you, what kind of application are you asking for here? Are you asking for lit fiber, dark fiber, self-provisioned, or wireless? Now the wireless here we'll talk about in a little bit later. That's going to be for an option that's related to bus service on buses. We will talk about service on buses when we get to the end of the session, but that is an option now, and that is something that's new. So that's why that wireless has been added. I'm just going to quickly show that if you click lit fiber, first of all, it's going to remind you. It's basically telling you, you said yes, you are asking for equipment or maintenance and operations, or what's the last one again? Equipment, maintenance, and oh, for heaven's sakes, it's right here. A special construction. Wow. What it's doing here is it's reminding you, you're asking for one of those three things right now. And it's reminding you that you will need to create a separate FRN to request the monthly charges. So what they're basically doing is saying, okay, you're going to have to set up a funding request for the special stuff, and then you have a separate funding request for the monthly stuff, for the monthly cost. So this text that just popped up here, this section here, is just reminding you, hey, you're about to ask for something special, something that's out of the ordinary. Make sure that you don't forget to add a funding request for your monthly cost as well. And then when you ask for lit fiber, it takes you directly into information about special construction. Why? Because when you have lit fiber that's being provided by your service provider, the only thing that you can get on top of that that is eligible for Category 1 is special construction. They don't allow Category 1 equipment, because the Category 1 equipment should be in a lit in the scenario where you have lit fiber being provided. That equipment should be being provided by the service provider rather than by you, the district. So it's going to launch you straight into this. If you are looking for something other than lit fiber, for example, dark fiber, yes, I know that, thank you. And then you hit continue. Now it's going to ask you, all right, well, are you leasing the dark fiber or do you have an IRU? IRUs are rare, really rare, so I'm not really even going to talk about them at this point. If it is something that you're engaged in, let me know and we can talk through it. But it's really not the common thing. Once again, you're going to click on that. It's going to say, all right, well, you've got leased dark fiber and you're going to ask for some of this special stuff. Make sure that you ask for your monthly cost as well. And now it's going to ask you, are you asking for a special construction? Are you asking for network equipment or maintenance and operations? The same thing happens with self-provisioned. in terms of what it's asking you for. I'm going to undo this, and I'm also going to undo this, right? So that, yep, I know. All right. So really, if you are getting into the business of asking for category 1 things that are other than your monthly costs, and you need some help through that process, don't hesitate to give me a call. We can set up a Teams meeting and we'll walk step by step right through it. It's not a problem. More than happy to do that for anyone who needs it. All right, so in our example now, we're going to go back to the idea of, all right, how do we make sure that we're asking for our monthly cost? We're going to say no here. We're not asking for any of those special things. We're just wanting the monthly cost. So we say no to the answer as the answer to your fiber request key information. But continue. Now we come to the narrative. The narrative is going to be a brief description of the services that are going to be provided. And perhaps you can include information about location and speeds, but it doesn't have to be particularly lengthy, nor does it have to be particularly elaborate, but it should be enough to let a reviewer understand what it is that you're asking for the funding to cover. Something really simple. Connections between buildings and give a speed. It's something like that. That might be a little bit bare bones, but since we're trying to get through a lot of material today, we'll keep this simple. All right, so we have now finished, and I'm just going to use save and view FRNs. We have finished creating the shell of the FRN, funding request. Now we need, and you've noticed, obviously, that at this point, we haven't entered any information about money. That's where we get into the line items. So in order to get into the line items, the way that we do this, there's a couple of different ways. You could click here and then click Manage FRN Line Items, or you can just click this link, and that will take us into a list of the line items that, well, we haven't created yet, but we're going to. So to start line items, we'll click the button Add New FRN Line Item. First question is, what kind of purpose is being used is this connection being used for? The vast majority of you are going to be answering number 2, the data connection between 2 or more sites entirely within your network. Basically, you're just saying that you need transport. You're not even asking for internet access. Internet access is paid for at the state level in your CAN connection or your NGKI connection, whichever you might have at the moment. Then it's going to ask you for the function. The function it's kind of a strange term to use here because it's really asking for the media. What medium is being used? Is it fiber, copper, wireless, other? We're going to just use the example of fiber because we talked about this being a lit fiber example. And then it's going to ask you for the type of connection. And here you can see it's the DSs, the OCs. Is it dark fiber? Is it MPLS? I think in most cases, you're probably getting an Ethernet handoff. But if you don't know the answer to this question, contact your service provider. They should know what kind of connection they're providing you. So it shouldn't be too hard to get that filled out correctly. And then save and continue again. Now it's going to ask for speeds. Let's just say that we're at 10 gigs. And this, of course, will be based upon your Form 470 and what you requested and what speed you ultimately decided to select for your locations. All right. Is this burstable bandwidth? Basically, what it's asking is, if there's a bottleneck at 10 gigs and all of a sudden you need a little bit more headroom because you're about to bump your head, can you burst above that speed or not? Again, this is probably going to be a question that you'd need to ask of your service provider. I'm just going to use the example of no at this point. If it does say yes, it's just going to ask you what the maximum burstable speed would be. So it might be 12 gigs instead of 10. Who knows? Again, that's going to be an answer from your service provider. Save and continue. Is this a direct connection to a single school, library, or non-instructional facility for internet access? There's those last three words are the key to this question. For internet access. No, you are not asking for internet access. You are asking for data connectivity, transport. So you say no here. Is this a connection between eligible schools that provides a wide area network? Yes, this is the data transport that you're looking for. So you say yes to that. Does it include firewall services? Probably not. If you're not sure, you can contact your service provider. I'm not aware of I don't know that I know of any more than maybe one or two districts around the state that actually have firewall in between their buildings, and it's just a basic firewall service. We're going to say no because in most cases you'll see that as being the case. All right, save and continue. Now we get into the monthly costs, whatever that monthly cost is. Let's just say it's $1,000 for a single circuit. Are there any ineligible costs associated with that? Are you delivering it to, for example, a primary center, an ineligible location? Is there some use that's being used that is involving ineligible users? Those folks will have to be accounted for in terms of a cost allocation. So if you have services that are going to be running to a primary center where you've got half of your kids are pre-K and the other half are like K through 3, you will need to factor out those pre-K kids because they are not eligible under E-rate rules in the state of Kentucky. So you would need to make some sort of calculation. Now, how you do that calculation is up to you, but you will need to be able to show your work. Okay, so have a small spreadsheet that shows how you calculated your cost allocation. It could be the number of kids, could be number of drops, could be number of classrooms. If you know how to measure traffic from a certain set of rooms versus the rest of the traffic in the associated with that particular line, you can do that as well. I'm just going to say $50. We'll just say that's a very small portion. The monthly quantity is going to be the number of lines that are reflected here. Let me stop right now and just say that this can get a little bit complicated. I'm using the example right now of a primary center where you would have to do a cost allocation. You might have 4 other buildings where there's no cost allocation required. Do them on a separate FRN line item. They can all go in the same FRN, but they need to be on separate line items because they get treated differently. If you were to say, well, we have 5 total circuits, you're gonna get yourself to an extra $200, or you're missing out on an extra $200 per month because those 4 other buildings don't have a cost allocation. So if I said, all right, I have 5 buildings, and I have 5 circuits, that's, you can see now that only one primary center should have the $50 coming out of it each month. So you're going to have $200 a month that is going to be, you're going to be losing out on. No reason to do that. Just set up a separate FRN line item for those other 4 buildings. The other thing is that if you have different line speeds going to different buildings, or different costs associated with those lines, those will have to go on separate line items as well. So there does need to be a little bit of consideration of how you structure your line items so that things match up and so that you don't hurt yourself in the long run in terms of costing yourself money that you would otherwise be eligible for. So with this being the example of the primary center, I'm just going to say 1 there. All we have is associated here is monthly recurring costs. There are no one-time unit costs, but if you don't enter zeros over here, it's going to bark at you and it's going to tell you that you can't move on. So make sure that you enter make sure that you enter zeros so that it will let you move forward. And then save and continue. Whoops. Save and continue. It's going to ask you now, is every entity for this organization receiving service? Not in the example we're using right now. It would say school A is the one that has the primary center. So we would identify just that one for this particular line item. If you don't have pre-K and you don't have cost allocations and everything else remains the same, well, then in that case, you would just say yes, and then it's going to automatically grab all of the entities within Epic that you have set up, and it's going to enter them all as recipients of service. And basically this next page is just, are you sure? I mean, that's really what this is. It just shows you these are the ones that you just selected. Are these correct? If they are, save and continue. And we are on to, and we're back to, I should say, the FRN, and now it shows you the line item that you have just entered. If we go through this again and add different things, we could do that. The only other thing I do want to mention here in this process is that you do need to separate out your taxes and fees if they are billed as such. If they are billed separated out on your bill, then you'll need to set up separate line items for the taxes and fees. If they are all bunched into one and there's no way for you to tell what's taxes and fees and what's not, then you don't need to do that. You just put that in together as part of the line cost. Okay. But in order to enter taxes and fees separately, for the function on this line item, select miscellaneous, and then the type of connection, and your drop down is US taxes and USF fees. You can also see that if you were charges for, let's say, we talked about this being the first year of contract, you might have installation, activation, and initial configuration costs. This is also where you would then enter those costs as well. Use that taxes and fees example. And it's going to ask you what those monthly costs are. Oh, we'll just say $56. There's $2.30 that's part of that calculation. Monthly quantity of 1, because we were just talking about the 1 primary center as our example here. Zeros, so that we can move on. And save and continue. Recipients of service, no. School district A. Add school district building A. Yep, that's correct. Are you sure? Yes, I am. Save and continue. And now you can see that line item 001 was for the connection. 002 was for taxes and fees. Make sense so far? Questions? I know it's a lot like throwing on a fire hose. Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, it's just based on how they bill it. It's just, yeah, if you take a look at one of your older bills, just make sure that you can see how they bill it out. You can estimate your taxes and fees based upon last year's. They might change a little bit. Oftentimes they do, especially because the USF fee changes on a yearly, or actually changes on a quarterly basis. So, you can build in a little bit of a fudge factor even on that. And as long as, when you go to request reimbursement, that the amount that is being requested on reimbursement is the actual amount rather than what was requested. That's right. Yeah, exactly. If your bill just shows connection to school A, $500, you're good to go. If it shows $500 and then shows another line that shows the taxes associated with that line, that's where you would want to use this approach. Yeah, good question. Any questions online? How are we looking over there? Any questions in the chat? No? Okay, good. Oh yeah, good deal. All right. Yep, that's a good one too. All right. So what comes next? Well, we've got, first of all, we go back to our list of funding requests, our FRNs. This is where we would add a new one. If we had just done one for special construction, we would do a new one now for the monthly fees. We just did actually one for monthly fees, so we could go back and we could do special construction or equipment if we needed to at this point. I'm going to start this process, or I'm going to start wrapping this example up. So we're going to move on to reviewing our Form 471. It says the next few steps, take some runs, some validations. Might take a few seconds. If you have a really big application, there's lots of line items, you might want to go and grab a cup of coffee. But if you have a relatively small one, it just takes a couple of seconds. Twiddle your thumbs for 5-10 seconds, click refresh. Didn't work that time. Oh, and did that time. So you can see it takes 10-15 seconds for a relatively small application. Bigger ones, like I said, like for the state application, yeah, it's, coffee, restroom break, come back, it's ready to go. All right. Do yourself a favor. Go ahead and open this up, that link for the Form 471 that you're filling out. See, you can see now it prints you a PDF. I would save a copy of your draft. I know it sounds silly because you're just about to make the final version happen as well. Review the draft anyway. Make sure that your data in here matches the data that you think you entered. If it doesn't, then you can come back here and come back to this edit form button. The edit form button will jump you right back into the application showing your funding requests. And that's where you can then jump into some of those details and edit them. If everything looks good, check off the box. It says, yeah, looks like it's all correct. And then you have options for certification. There are two ways you can certify your application. One is you can send it to somebody else, or the other is for you to do it yourself. No problem if you do it yourself. That's great. That's fine. It comes down to a question of who really wants to be or feels like they need to be responsible at the district level. So it's going to be a district level decision, but there may be an instance where you might have a superintendent who feels like they are the person who needs to be signing off on these documents. That's fine. That's great. First of all, make sure that they are an Epic user, that they've been provided an account for Epic, because if they haven't, you won't be able to send it to them for certification. If that's the case, and you want to send it for certification, you'll click send for certification. And what it's going to do is this is going to make the application available under the tasks, this up here, for any full rights Form 471 user in your organization, in your district. I'm going to say no now, but if you click yes, it would ultimately end up taking you out of this application. It'll take you to a page that said it's been sent for certification, and then you can go back to your landing page and do whatever other things you need to do. Then you would need to get with your superintendent and say, okay, Frank, you need to sit down and log into Epic, go to the tasks, find the Form 471, click on it, open it up. It'll open up to the certification page, or actually the page that we're looking at here. And then you'll click continue to certification. And now you're to the certification page. Applicant certifications. All of the check boxes will need to have a check next to them. None of these are gotchas like they used to be. There used to be a handful of them that were kind of gotcha. Like if you check that off, you checked off that you're not following the rules, and it was kind of sneaky and it confused some people. So all of them are there. I do encourage you to go ahead and read them. You should know what you're attesting to. I mean, this is a legal document, so make sure that you understand the rules that you are saying that you're going to abide by. It's probably, just one of those things that's wise to know what you're signing off on. Other portion of this is the total funding summary. Now, you can see that most of this is filled out for you based upon the information that you've already entered. The three things that are not, first of all, the one is the total budgeted amount allocated to resources not eligible for E-rate support. So basically, this is all the rest of your technology budget for your district, whatever that might be, whatever that amount might be. It might be that you have an estimate of what you're going to be spending in 2024. You can use an estimate here. So I'm just throwing a number out there, whatever that number is. You could also use an estimate based on previous year's spending, which means you could go back to, for example, your TAR report and use the number from that. So whatever works best for you, that's the number that you need to enter there. And there are these two drop downs. These are the gotchas that used to be checkboxes that are no longer checkboxes. They're drop downs, and they are yes or no answers. And that's actually helpful because it's pretty straightforward. The questions are you receiving any of the funds directly from a service provider listed on your Form 471 filed by this billed entity for this funding year? In other words, is your service provider giving you the money to cover the non-discounted portion? That's a problem because that's a direct violation of the rules. If you click yes to this answer, you might as well just print it out, ball it up, and throw it in the trash because you ain't getting funds. It's just the way it is. Now, granted, I do want you to answer honestly and truthfully. So I'm not telling you should say no. I'm saying that if you are saying yes, you've got bigger problems. So answer it truthfully. Another one is, has the service provider listed on this form by your billed entity assisted you in locating funds needed to pay the non-discounted share? They are allowed to help you find the funds. They aren't allowed to give them to you. I will highly recommend you stay away from that scenario as well, because there was an example way back in the just post MCI days where they had like the WorldCom Foundation, and MCI was a provider, and then they would direct districts to the MCI Foundation for funding to help cover the non-discounted cost. So go talk to our foundation. They might help you. It can get really, really hairy. I recommend you stay away from that. Make sure that you just have district level budgeted funds for these kinds of services, and be able to honestly say no to both of these. One will make you ineligible. The other will give you a world of hurt in terms of trying to be able to demonstrate that those funds didn't actually come from the service provider. And then last, but certainly not least, is the certify button. Yes, technically that's second to last because you got one more button to push before you're done. And this one just says, "Ooh, scary! You can go to jail. Don't be lying to us. It's electronic. Yeah, okay, we get it. Yeah, I'm allowed to do this. Yes, done. There we go. We have successfully filed the Form 471 for 2024. Questions over that example? Okay.
That's like in the military.
Very quickly.
When you have to sign, this is Greta.
Out, go here, back to there,
Oh, you can hear me.
back to here. And I'm going to take these first couple of pages and just blow through them because you've already seen them before and there's no need for discussion. Oh, look at that. Great typing. Yes. Skip that. Save and continue. This one's going to be category 2. Obviously, we're going to use an example of a handful of switches, for example. We'll use that as our rolling example. Category 2, save and continue. Again, we have these review pages. Yes, 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 yes. We know we double checked that before, so we know that that works now. And we're going to add a funding request. No, it's not a continuation. No, we're not going to copy because this is going to be unique. You're probably not going to be using copy FRN for category 2 requests at all. And now it's going to ask us basic maintenance, internal connections, or managed internal broadband services. Equipment is all going to end up being internal connections. Continue. If you are getting into, or are you planning on requesting that some of those other services and you need some help, again, don't hesitate to give us a call. It is going to be from a contract. Here's where it's going to get a little different. When it asks you to associate a contract, instead of searching on your own contract, again, this is going to be an example where you're purchasing from the KETS contracts. You will change this number out and you erase the number that's there. Because this is just the example. You're going to type in 128821. That is the entity number for the state consortium, of which, by the way, you are all a member. Thanks for being members. All right, and then you'll click search. Now, obviously, right now we're in the practice area, so it's not going to recognize anything that's a real entity number. So I'm going to come back in here and actually put in 1178. And then you'll click search. Scroll down. You will now see a list of all of the state level contracts. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the contract matrix. Wait a minute, I haven't received my contract matrix, Scott. What do I do? Well, we are in the process of working on some last minute conversations and adjustments and what's the word I want to look for? Some editing that needs to be done to make sure that we are capturing all of the proper resellers and contract holders for those KETS contracts. So we're updating that information. My goal is to have that contract matrix out to you a week from tomorrow, a week from Friday. Yes. So you will have the contract matrix, and on the contract matrix, it's going to have a list of all of the resellers and the contract holders. You're going to identify the one that you identified as winning your mini bid, and we'll talk about mini bids here in a little bit. But you're going to identify that contract and look for the contract number associated with that reseller and on the contract matrix, and then come and look for that contract ID in the list of contracts that you're going to see when you search. And you're going to say, oh, well, the contract matrix for this contract holder X, reseller Y, that's the person that those are the folks that won my mini bid. They have contract ID number 56734. Contract 56734. Oh, there it is. Click it. Yeah, I clicked the wrong one because I should have clicked something for category 2 here. Let me see. Yeah, there. Nope. Oh, thanks. Didn't deselect the other one. Here we go. Really? You're gonna do me like this, huh? I probably should have just entered another. Here we go. Let's try this one. There we go. All right. So once you selected that one, now you have the opportunity to double check and cross-reference more of the information that's going to be on the contract matrix to make sure that it matches up with the one that you're seeing here. Do your due diligence, make sure that those match. You've got the right one. Then it's going to ask you for a for the contract expiration date. You will find that on the contract matrix. be a June 30th. I think it'd actually be June 30th of 2025. And then continue. And here we're back to the narrative. Now we're going to say switches for elementary school. And I'm just using that as an example. Switches for, and I would probably put a little bit more depth in terms of, these are going into IDFs, it's a switch to connect a certain part of the building, blah, blah. It doesn't have to be really, really detailed, but something that lets them understand that it's a category 2 connection, and perhaps where it's going to go, within your network infrastructure. One other thing I want to mention about the narrative right now, and this applies to all of the narratives that you will do. If, for whatever reason, you were unable to get into Epic and update the discount data for your buildings before the close of the administrative window that happened last Friday, if you were not able to get that updated, here's where you make that request. Okay, and it'll actually do it in 2 places, but here's one of them. List out the building, all the information, all the updated information. I can guarantee you that if you do that, they will ask you for third-party validation. So they're going to come back to you and say, we need a letter from the state or some other form of documentation that verifies that what you're proving or what you're claiming is true. We're more than happy to put those together for you. Just let us know that you need one, and we'll get it out to you. But this is the other place where this is one of the 2 places where you would do that. That is true, by the way, not only for category 2, but for category 1. You would do that for any funding request and any Form 471 that you do for the year. We're going to save and manage FRN line items, excuse me. All right, so we're going to now create a new FRN line item for this device or these devices. Type of internal connections, you can see we have a number of different options here. Data distribution is what we're looking for. And it says type of product, you can see switch. This is all iterative, so if you change this data distribution, change it to wireless, obviously your options change as well, okay? So if you don't initially see what you're looking for in one of these other things like data protection, oh, look at that, there's UPS backup, battery backup. So those are common as well. That's why I just picked on that one. But if for the example that we're using with CATS equipment, those routers and switches, in most cases, it's going to be either data distribution or wireless data distribution because you'll have access points. Yes. Correct. Very good. Excellent question. Yes. And for those who might not have heard the question who are online, the question was, if we have switches and access points, do we do a separate line item for each one? And the answer to that is yes. You would just do one line item for the switches and then a separate line item for access points. And then it asks for make and model. I'm going to just randomly select one so as not to be picking necessarily on anybody or anything unfairly. In fact, we don't even deal with whoever that watch guard. I've never even heard of them before. And again, model number. Make and model number. Is it a lease or a non-purchase agreement? I think most of you are purchasing, so it's no there. Is installation included in the price? If it is, then you would say yes. If it is not, you would say no. If it is no, then you'll need to do again another line item that will allow you to do installation as a separate. And then again, you're going to find that under the miscellaneous category. So your data distribution, wireless data distribution, racks, there's a miscellaneous where you can, again, you'll be able to do taxes and fees, and you'll also be able to do installation, initial config, that kind of thing. I'm going to say no for now. Save and continue. Is there a monthly cost? Well, no, you're buying things here. So in this case, we're going to see zeros on this side. But once again, make sure you enter something because it'll bark at you if you don't. And then we go over to our one-time unit costs. And might have, I don't know, let's say 2,300. And then we have ineligible unit costs. Again, if you have a unit that is serving in part an ineligible group of students, for example, pre-K, you will need to do, again, some sort of small some sort of calculation to come up with a number that represents their use and factor that out. Again, it's going to be a small thing. It's going to be something that you will establish the criteria for yourself. But again, I will say, show your work. Make sure that you have some sort of documentation. You know, could be you sitting at Starbucks and write it on a napkin, but make sure you keep that with your records. And then you've done your calculation, and it'll just say it was like $50. Really small. And then the quantity, the number of items that fall under this category. Now, again, I'm gonna point out that this example is a switch that's going to go into a building that has pre-K kids, and so you are doing a cost allocation. If you don't have a cost allocation, then as many switches that are model ABC 123, all the same model, you can do on the same FRN line item. But in this case, we might only be doing 2 switches. There might be 2 closets that need 2 new switches, and they're serving this one school. So in this case, we'd only put 2, and then we would set up a separate FRN line item if we got a total of 10 switches, and those other 8 are going into other buildings where there are no ineligible users. So we don't have to factor out that kind of use. We don't have to do a cost allocation. You don't want to hurt yourself again on the funding as far as that's concerned. So make sure that you set up a separate line item for like items where there are similar circumstances, whether there is or isn't a cost allocation that's necessary. Again, it's going to now ask us, is every organization receiving service? In this case, no. It's going to go to a specific building as the recipient of service. Shows it down below that they have been selected. Save and continue. Basically, it's just said, you've selected them, right? Yes, we have. Save and continue. And our line item has been created. You would repeat that process for as many line items as you have. If you have a very large category 2 order that's coming from one of your KETS providers, they may, some of them as a part of their service, will provide you with a bulk upload template. Very nice feature, especially for big orders. Saves a lot of time. Drag and drop. I will say this, it is persnickety. If that bulk upload template is not just so, it doesn't really like it and it will kick back at you. Okay, so just be aware that you might have some assistance that you're going to need to get from your service provider to make sure that that bulk upload template fits and gets properly accepted into the system. And once again, much like the copy FRN feature, if you do the bulk upload, take the time to go back and review each line item to make sure that they're accurate based upon the quote that you've been given. And if you are building a bulk upload template of your own, because, for example, they didn't give you one. They weren't, the folks that you're working with don't provide them as a matter of course. You can download the template here, build the template, fill the template out in Excel, and then upload it here when you get back to this point in the process. But this is where you would this is where you get a copy of the template. Submit. Yes. Oh, yeah, whoops. All right. Yeah, that's because of, all right. And then the rest of this is the same as the way out of it, so to speak, the outro is the same as the category 1 process. Questions? Yes.
Let's say I find 2 switches for all 3 of my schools. Can I click yes there?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, you can. Other questions? Anything online? Oh, looking. Ready? Okay, then there are some things that I want to quick run through. That
Hey,
you'll have
Scott.
to forgive me here. I'm gonna
Scott.
see if I can put this on. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing real quick, and then I'm going to share again. Share my screen now. All righty, and okay. So a couple of things that I would like to sort of reiterate. I know that we talked about some of this stuff as far as mini bids are concerned during the Form 470 trainings, but it's worth reiterating because it's probably really fresh in your minds right now. If you are purchasing from the KETS contracts for your networking components, or basic maintenance for those components, you are required to conduct a mini bid. You are selecting one of the previously selected contracts that have already been established at the state level. Because there's more than one available, you have to go through the process of selecting one based upon your own set of criteria and the pricing that's associated with them. So that's what's called a mini bid. It's what you do instead of a Form 470 for purchasing from the state contracts. Use of those KETS contracts is required by state law for the products for which there are the established state technical standards, those standards being basically encompassed in those contracts. When you go to request quotes, you need to, even though you might already know which ones you want, which manufacturer, you still are required by E-rate rules to contact and reach out to all of the contract holders and resellers. And let me reiterate that, because that was an issue for a district fairly recently, and I feel bad for them because somewhere along the way something got missed. But all contract holders and resellers. So the contract holders are basically the OEMs, your big guys, the Ciscos and HPs and Arubas and Dreams and Junipers of the world. I don't want to leave anybody out because I don't want to be unfair, but those are the contract holders. They then identify other organizations that can sell on their behalf, the resellers. You have to contact all of them, and whom to contact is listed on the KETS Network Services webpage. And I thought I was clicking on that. Oh, come on now. There we go. Greta has a question. All right, hold on just a second, Greta. All right, here we go. And this lays it out for you. For quotes and orders, that's who to contact. This page is under some reconstruction. Actually, we're not reconstructing it, we're building it out, adding some additional information, which will be important to a couple of items as I continue on in this discussion of mini bids. But when you go to send a request for quote, make sure that you are sending it to not only the people associated with the main contract holder, but also their contract agents. So if you were interested in, oh, I don't know, I would really like to have Cisco equipment, that still means that you would have to contact the folks at the Dell, not only just Dell, but Encore and Rolta and Waypoint. And same thing for Extreme, Converge One, Step CG, Extreme. So basically, you see anybody here who's listed as for information and quotes contact, those people need to be included in your requests. You can send out a single email with all of the information on it. Okay. Doesn't have to be one to each individual person. So you can make it sort of more efficient by doing it in a single fell swoop. Question. We do not have a distribution list because these contacts change so crazily and so often that I think that's about right. That's where it was. For information and quotes for Fortinet. For information and quotes, contact. These other sales engineers, no, you're asking for a quote. Now, are in the process, as I say, of working on this page. So, and the goal is to have this ready for prime time. We've already got conversations going with the representatives from these organizations to get it nailed down to who do we contact for the quote. Okay, so we should have a listing of whom to contact for each of them, like here, quotes and orders. Again, just those people that are identified as for quotes and orders. But yes, it's going to be like 17 or 18, maybe 19 of them, something like that. There's going to be one or maybe two for each of the contract agents or the resellers, as well as if there is one listed for the contract holder as well. So yes, it's a little bit of a pain. You could have to go through the Form 470 process. Either way, it is what it is, unfortunately, at this point. We don't have a distribution list. I'll take that back as a suggestion. That might be something that, we could, I don't know that maintaining that is going to be, what kind of beast that's going to be, but you said we had a question from, oh, okay. If you sent it out and you sent one out to each of the resellers and the contract holders that are listed currently, you're fine. Yep. Yeah, yes. That is an excellent point. Print this page in some form. You can print it as a PDF, store it, and say and make sure it's dated in some way. On your PDF or on your printout, so that you can show that on that date, as of that date, these were the official resellers. These are the people that we contacted. Really good point. Thank you. Question we had online was, if a vendor asks for a scoring matrix who did not win the bid, what are we required to send, if anything? Nothing. Not by E-rate rules, and not, to my knowledge, by KETS rules either. You are obligated in no way to provide them with that unless they were to ask via a FOIA request. If there was a formal Freedom of Information Act or an open records request kind of thing, that would be something that they might do, and then that would be a conversation you would want to have with your with your district's lawyers, your district's counsel. You can. I mean, there's no reason why you don't. There's no reason why you can't either. It's You are not obligated to unless there's a formal freedom, FOIA or open records request. Not from an E-rate perspective. Okay, nothing in the E-rate rules says if they ask for it, you have to give it to them. Hmm? Okay, good. Yeah, and if a vendor asks for a meeting, you can politely decline or you can accept. It's up to you as far as that's concerned. When you make your request, make sure that you do not identify that this is the product we want. If you say this is the product we want, you must absolutely must add the words or equivalent to that. This has to be at least perceived as being a truly open contest. If you just say this is what we want, you've not left it really open to the possibility that something else, an alternative might be a worthy option. We also recommend that you ask them to identify specifically the KETS state contract that they are eligible to sell through. They should be able to provide you with a contract number that matches up to the contract matrix and to the web page that we just showed you, that references those specific contracts. I think we have that. Yes, and we have copies of the contract, including the contract number for each of the contract holders. So, for instance, if you were reaching out to, or if you were ultimately doing business with Encore under Fortinet, they should be identifying the Fortinet contract, and there's the number here on the webpage. That should match up with the information that they provide you. I would recommend that you also ask for a publicly available listing or advertisement of the MSRP for the product or service that they are including in their responses, because the discount on that as a part of the KETS process, that when they bid, they offer bids based upon not actual direct pricing of a product, but the % off MSRP that you will get by purchasing through that contract. If you don't know what that MSRP is, you don't know whether they're giving you the proper price or not. This also brings to the fact that if you get multiple responses that respond under the same contract holder, their pricing should be the same. Okay? So you should not be seeing something where these two resellers are under, I'm just going to use Extreme as the example. Bless their hearts. I'm not really picking on them, I promise. You get those two, and those two give you different pricing for the exact same model number. You know there's a problem there somewhere, that somebody's not using the correct MSRP. So I would also ask in your mini bid request that they provide you with the MSRP and where that's coming from, as well as the discount rate or the % off that's being offered. Ask for that too. What discount % off the MSRP are they giving you? Again, use the website that, again, we'll be working on to have fully built out by the end of next week, to compare, to make note of whether or not what they are offering to you. And here's your MSRP. You can see the % off MSRPs for these kinds of things. So you can see that Fortinet should be giving you 50.1% off MSRP for their wired layer 2 switches. So you should be able to figure out, based upon the component that they're proposing, if they give you the MSRP, you should be able to then calculate, all right, they said $500 and we're supposed to be getting 50% off. So the MSRP should be $1,000 plus $1,010, something like that. Make sense? Go, yes. So pricing should be verifiable and applied by applying the percent off MSRP to the MSRP provided. Pricing from sellers offering the same products should be the same. There is no Form 470 required. There is not a 28-day waiting period required for a mini bid, although we do recommend that you give up to 10 business days. I would say 8 to 10 is reasonable. I wouldn't give any fewer than that unless you're in a very, very last minute situation. But seeing as the window just opened yesterday, you have plenty of time to get your mini bids out on the street now so that there's plenty of time there for them to respond. Make sure that you also set a deadline. Be very, very clear, not only date, but time of day, so that you can then prove that if they send a mini bid proposal to you after the deadline, that you and you don't consider it, that you are within your rights to not consider that because it was late. And then evaluate your quotes as if you had filed your own Form 470, which brings us to bid evaluation. You're going to set up your own bid evaluation matrix. And this applies, by the way, to your own Forms 470 as well as mini bids. So everything here applies to both. Your price must be the most heavily weighted criteria, but it's not the only criteria. You have other criteria, and these 5 that are coming up are not an exhaustive list. You are allowed to use the criteria of your choice as within reason. I mean, obviously, my friend Bob is a part of the sales team. That's obviously you don't want to get into that kind of thing. But reasonable things like a completeness of response, compatibility of the product with your existing infrastructure, prior experience or past performance with the vendor, the reseller, the products, all 3. The price of non-E-rate eligible items can be considered, as well as the ability, for example, to serve the entire district. I use that probably more on a WAN contract kind of thing, where you might have a service provider that can reach 4 out of your 6 buildings, but not those 2, and so that's a problem. Assign points to each of your criteria. Price is going to get the most points of any of them. Again, doesn't have to, if you have a total of 100 points, doesn't mean that price has to be 50 points. Just means the price has to be more than everything else that you're evaluating. So you could have 25 points for price and then 4 other criteria where you have 20, 20, 20, and 15. Okay. That basically allows you to account for things that flow into the idea or the concept of total cost of ownership, and those kinds of things get factored into your evaluation as to what is the most cost-effective solution. Score your bids based on your bid evaluation matrix, and that's how you determine your winner. If you receive no bids, or 1 bid for that matter, on a mini bid or a Form 470, make sure that you send yourself an email that says that, and then put that email in your folder. I would include just like the superintendent or CFO on that email, CC them, just so that you have some sort of backup factor to that, and just memorialize the fact that, as of today, the deadline has come and gone. We received 0, or we received only 1 bid. It gives you a way to then demonstrate, if you were ever under audit asked, well, what did you do if you had no bids? How can you prove this? Well, here's, on such and such a date, I reached out to our CFO and said, we've received no bids, and here's the action we're taking in the next step. And then in the next step, you can then reach out to if you receive no bids. If you receive one, you still need to evaluate it. It still needs to be a cost-effective solution. So its price can't be ridiculously through the roof. But assuming that that's not the case, you can still then select that one that you've received. If you've received zero, you can then reach out to particular vendors and ask them for specific feedback and quotes. That's particularly more on the Form 470 side for your own sake rather than a mini bid. You should be receiving at least one response for your mini bids. Last but not, well, no, it's not last. There's another thing after this, isn't there? Yep, there's Wi-Fi on buses. I'm just going to read this really quick. How many of you are actually looking into Wi-Fi on buses for this year? You are. Okay, good. Just wanted to know because I'm just kind of curious as to, you know, what level of interest there is on this as a whole. It is eligible under Category 1. Requires that you submit a local Form 470. This is not something that you can purchase off of CAT's contract. So you will have to file a Form 470 of your own, even if you have an existing contract for wireless bus service. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Maintenance and operations of bus Wi-Fi equipment is not eligible at all. Just straight up not eligible. So don't think that you're going to get anything other than the solution to provide the connectivity. And the connectivity itself, the cost of the equipment and service. Compliance with SIPA and local AUPs is required and content must be filtered. If you are getting E-rate support for wireless on your buses, you must in some way, shape, or form run it through a content filter. Now that may be that you're running that connectivity or those connections back through your school district, and so it's going through Lightspeed. That's cool. That's works. That's fine. If you choose that that's not something you want to do, that's fine too. That's your option. But be aware that you are still required by law to have, and that goes both Kentucky law, Senate Bill 230, 240. Oh, Chuck would have my tush for not remembering what that number is. And then SIPA. Both of them require that some sort of content filtering is taking place for that connectivity that's on the buses, which provides an implication later on for some content for some SIPA compliance documentation that you're going to need to keep. We'll talk about that in a minute. Contracts with multiple providers will not be considered as duplicative as long as they are necessary to deliver coverage to buses in districts where a single provider doesn't have full coverage over the geographic area of the district. So it might be that you need AT&T on some of these buses and what's the other one? Verizon on these buses or somebody other than that, because they may or may not have the ability to hit all of the geographic area that's served by the buses in question. So if you're asking for more than one service provider for your buses, they aren't going to assume immediately that that is duplicative. Only buses which are owned by the district or leased by the district from a transportation service are eligible. Occasionally used charter buses, the van out back that takes the band, the band equipment, things like that, vans, cars, other vehicles are not eligible. Basically, it's your yellow buses. It's not one of those that either belongs to the district or is being rented or leased through a transportation service. Don't plan on getting E-rate support for those. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but if you do it, you're going to have to pay for it in full yourself. Districts must keep an asset inventory of all equipment on buses, just as they must for fixed asset equipment, whether the district owns the bus or not. Okay? So just because it's owned by somebody else, it's still your equipment and it's still your services that are going on that. Connections may only be used by students or school personnel during normal operating hours while transporting students to and from school or school-related activities. That includes sports events, field trips, things like that. When there is a clear educational purpose for enabling these connections. These connections must be disabled outside of these hours and or circumstances. Maybe something that you're going to want to have a conversation with when you go out to put out a 470 to make sure that you are going to have that ability to do that and to filter to turn off those devices and turn off those services outside of those non-school or non-activity hours. You will not be required to consider bids for technology other than those which provide Wi-Fi on buses. In other words, if it's not strictly a Wi-Fi for buses solution that's being offered, you don't have to consider, Bob wants to sell you an airport that's going to hook up to a Verizon box, and it's going to be you are not required to consider something outside of a solution that's specifically for bus Wi-Fi service. You will be required to submit an RFP document of some sort. It doesn't have to be a formal, big, long 30-page kind of RFP. It can be a single page, but on that single page, you do need to make sure that you are, outlining the number of buses to be outfitted, the geographic route and location information, in addition to any service level requirements that you might have. For example, the ability to turn it on and off. To run it back through your district if you want to run the traffic back through your district so that you can use Lightspeed or whatever content filtering you use. In the narrative, and this is directly from USAC, by the way, they say, use the phrase, applicants seek bids for wireless bus service and, if applicable, associated equipment to make the service functional to provide Wi-Fi. Right? So that quote. So make sure that if you are asking for bus Wi-Fi service, that you use that phrase in your narrative. That's going to make it clear that the funding request that you're asking for that particular service is related to bus Wi-Fi specifically. That's just really to point it out to USAC's reviewers so that they understand, oh, this is about bus Wi-Fi, and they can move forward. Reference your associated RFP document for additional information in addition to adding the applicant seeks bids for wireless bus service, et cetera, et cetera. When completing the service request online in Epic, select the following options in the drop-down menus. I seek bids for internet access and/or data transmission. I seek bids for internet access and data transmission service provided over any combination of transmission medium, e.g. fiber networks, fiber, non-fiber hybrid, or non-fiber networks such as cable, blah, 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 blah. Also then select I seek bids for data plans or wireless adapters for mobile devices for commercial wireless service for a school or library that does not have an existing broadband internal connections. On the service request details include the quantity, that is the number of buses to be outfitted, and the entities served. These are the schools that will be served by the buses to be outfitted. Because buses often serve multiple schools, it is recommended to include all schools as recipients of service. Kind of an obvious thing. Also include capacity requirements and whether you are seeking equipment installation, activation, and initial configuration. It would also be wise to include this information in the RFP document as well. Form 471 is currently being updated, and actually I think it has been now, to accommodate these requests for Wi-Fi on bus services. USAC recommends the following. It is best to consider these requirements rather than recommendations. Submit a separate FCC Form 471 for wireless school bus services. That is wise. If you know you're going to ask for bus service, do it on a separate Form 471. That way, if that gets held up for any confusion, you're reviewed and approved right away without having to get held up by the one thing that's over here bottlenecking everything else. You don't want them to be cross-pollinating bad juju, so to speak. Submit a separate funding request for each contract or vendor for those services. Use the school bus Wi-Fi or similar name as the FCC Form 471 nickname. List all your schools as recipients of service that will be served by the buses and clearly explain the number of buses on your request in the FRN narrative. We will be posting this document, by the way, as well. We'll make sure that this is available to you, this outline. And then documentation, just documentation in a general sense. You must keep everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. If it has to do with E-rate, put it in a folder. If it's paper, if it's electronic, put it in an electronic folder or in a SharePoint library or whatever you use to store your documents. Make sure you are keeping everything. Emails, records of phone conversations. I recommend for phone conversations that you always follow up with an email just to confirm that what you've heard and what you've talked about is reflected in that. That seems to be more the easiest part as far as I'm concerned. Anything relating to discount data, your RFPs, your mini bid requests, bids that you've gotten, questions that you get. When it comes to questions that you get, by the way, when you put a 470 out or a mini bid out on the street and you start getting questions from vendors, make sure that you provide an answer not just to that vendor, but that all of the vendors have the ability to access the questions and answers that you've been getting. You don't want to be creating the impression or perhaps the actual fact that one vendor has got an advantage because they've got information that the others didn't have access to. Okay, which is why I always recommend that if somebody calls you on the phone and asks you a question, have them put it in writing and then respond in writing and make sure that your response is posted either to your Form 470 as a supplemental document or that you email it back out to your mini bid the contacts to make sure that they've got answers to those questions. All of your bid evaluation documentation, make sure that's all recorded and saved. And then, as I said, any communications with bidders, all of that information has to be kept for 10 years after the last day to receive services, the last date to receive services. So, for example, at the end of this year, this funding year will be June 30th or if you're going category 2, September 30th of 2025. Add 10 years, and that's the point at which, so 35, June 30th or July 1st of 2035. Holy mackerel, I can't believe when I started this, I thought it was going to be a long time when I was talking about 7 years, because we had to hold on for 7 years back then. And at that point, I was talking about 2019. I thought, oh, wow, so long ago. Here I am now talking about 2035. Wow. Getting old. Yeah, sure, please do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I always make a copy of the information she gives me.
Mhm.
Does she have to retain that?
No, if you've got a copy of it for E-rate records, she's not required to. That's right. But you need to make sure that you get a copy, because I know that their retention schedule is like 3 years or 5 years or something. It's really short compared to E-rate. Yeah. So yes, as long as you've got a copy of it for your own E-rate records, you're good to go.
Okay.
Good question though. Thank you. So all of that needs to be kept for 10 years after the last date to receive services. And then there's SIPA. And this is sort of ongoing that SIPA requires a number of different things. One, your district has to hold a public hearing, an opportunity for the public to come in and talk about internet safety, that they can share their information or their input, their opinions on what they would like to see the district doing with respect to making the internet safe for their kids while they're at school. You have to also have announced that publicly ahead of time. which means that there needs to be some documentation that you need to show. And maybe it's just a meeting announcement that, on such and such a date, the board board will be having their standard board meeting, and during this board meeting, we will be talking about XYZ ABC. One of those items is internet safety, and that the public will have an opportunity to speak if they want to. Okay, so you have an announcement of some sort. You have to then have evidence of the hearing, of the public hearing actually taking place. Minutes of the board meeting would suffice, as long as you can see that on that board, on that meeting, that there was an opportunity for the public to have their say. The district also must have an AUP which addresses internet safety. You also have to have some sort of evidence that there are things about internet safety that are taught to the kids. And then you also have to have the technology protection measure in place. This is where we talked about, having your buses rerouting back through some sort of content filter. If you don't do buses, and I'm just going to use the example, forgive me, I'm just going to use the example of Lightspeed because that's most of what people use right now for the content filtering. You need to be able to prove that every year that there was a technology protection measure in place. The way to do that is to print out a log file from that TPM, from Lightspeed, and save that as a part of that year's E-rate documentation. If you have bus service and that bus service goes through a different filter, you'll need to go grab a copy of that filter as well to show that that was working at the time as well. It just needs to be dated. It can be a single day's log, but it has to be somewhere within that school year, and it needs to show the sites that were blocked at that time. That's right. It's a good question. It is a one-shot deal. That's right. The question was, is the public hearing a one-time only thing that you have to do? Yes, it is. That having been said, I would encourage everyone in this room right here and right now to go back to your district, and when you get back to the office, make sure that you can find that you have an announcement record of the announcement of that meeting, and that you have record that meeting actually occurred. Because if you don't, you need to go ahead and have that happen right away. Yes, question. Yes, ma'am. That's a very good question. Board minutes and a board agenda posted ahead of time, and board minutes, both are adequate documentation to demonstrate that that hearing has taken place. Very good question. Other questions? Because I am finally to the end. And I know I ran Matt out of time. He was hoping I'd be done a little quicker. Well, thank you all very much. And if you don't have, I'll stick around for a little bit. If you want to talk one-on-one, that I'm happy to help. But thank you all for having us, coming out on days when probably most of you are probably on snow days. But thank you all very much. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Matt, myself, Caprice. We are here to help you, and we do want to make this as successful as possible for you in your E-rate journeys. Thank you all very much.